Hello, friends, and we're continuing now with letters out of Occult Meditation. But what I've done, this is going to be program number 61, short program because I've got lots coming up tonight. Um, I'm going to jump over letter 9 because I've already written extensive commentary on letter 9. I will, I think, do it on video. I think so. But for right now, we're going to letter 10. Letter 9 is all about the new esoteric schools, which in a way is my passion. So I thought I want to not have sort of time limits concerning it. And we just have a little bit left in the book. This is about the purification of the vehicles, letter 10. So I'll be back to letter 9 before you know it. We're talking here about purifying the personality, particularly the different parts of the personality, and I would say also the personality as a whole, because it is in a way, the sum of its parts. And there is a fourth aspect which we can consider the integrating personality, whether that is integrating properly and relatively selflessly, which I guess at first it never does, somehow. Well, there's going to be some flashing going here on the picture. I can see that. But eventually, the dweller on the threshold succumbs to the pressure of the overshadowing soul. But here we're taking it step by step. This is very straightforward. Well, how can I ever say that? This, I will say, though, is a very straightforward little chapter, little letter. And I've known a lot of my friends, and, they're fairly advanced in the studies. And they say, oh, I've done that already in another life or another life, and I don't have to do it anymore. So it just ends up being an alibi, an excuse for not really upholding the physical disciplines and even the emotional and mental disciplines, emotional loveliness, as DK calls it, and mental clarity, the ability to hold the mind steady in the light. So the purification of the vehicles, and it's amazing how much Master DK managed to convey to Alice Bailey. It looks to me like in about a half a year, in the latter part of 1920, and of course she had to be a very efficient typist, and she did write about how much she took down. Was it about 7 pages per session, and it was single spaced. Then, of course, being a Gemini and all that, she had to manage the editing. And eventually she, I'm sure, received help with that through her close associate, RSU. Those must have been exciting days, but, we're in a position now where we can actually get the benefit of the whole opus, the whole work that they put forward. And that is great for a synthetic position. The need arises these days for tested instruments. When those who guide human evolution at this period cast their eyes over the race in the search for such instruments, as they did for locating Madame Blavatsky, they see few as yet ready for the service required. Alice Bailey was obviously ready, having worked with the Tibetan before, he as the supervising disciple, she as the chela in the light. But likewise, they see some who are, with a certain amount of training, will fill the need fairly adequately. The Tibetan is being cautious, and he's not exaggerating or overstating the situation. Somewhat, the fulfillment can come. And not with completely satisfactory conditions, but okay, close enough. As evolution proceeds, the polarization of the race changes. I mean, that is where the average point of tension is held. It goes up subplane by subplane, we might say, from the completely, what we usually call savage state, filled with that Martian red, up to sustained focus on the higher mental plane, higher astral plane, and even moving up the subplanes of the mind, and eventually, as initiation, real initiation becomes a possibility, moving into the higher mental plane. Excuse me. Men are polarized now principally in their emotional bodies. That's where they, sometimes you can use the word focused. It's fairly similar to polarized, although a mentally focused person is not the same as a mentally polarized person. Mentally polarized means even something higher, achieved between the second and third initiations. Men are polarized now principally in their emotional bodies. The feelings, desires, and concerns of the personality sway them. The emotional body is the focal point of the personality, and this we see constantly in the unintelligent, credulous, gullible reactions of so many who cannot think for themselves yet. The emotional body is the focal point for the personality. It acts as a clearinghouse for all that concerns it. It's a banking term, a clearinghouse, and as the junction of the lower and the higher. Well, we live in a particularly astral Buddhic solar system, and it's very Devic, with more than twice as many Devic units, or maybe Devic monads, as human monads. So it is to be expected that right now we are dealing with the predominance of the emotional nature. It's okay, and we do need a sensitive emotional nature. I was, I don't know how it happened, but I wandered today after a program into the fine arts, which I've always been interested in and participating in. And the great pianists were on YouTube playing some of the things that they play so extraordinarily well, including the greatest of all the pianists in the last 100 years. I don't know. I sometimes think he's the reincarnation of Franz Liszt, but it was Vladimir Horowitz, and the sensitivity is just extraordinary. The sensitivity and the skill, whether some kind of Mercury-Venus combination. And we need that sensitivity of the emotional body coupled with the exquisite mentality, extraordinary memory, obviously a very old soul. So the sensitivity has to be there, yes, and the astral body has to be very sensitive, especially to the need of others. But we also have to move on into the mind. Very important. And as Master DK says, when we're talking to the child souls with less experience, we're oftentimes finding ourselves saying, if you would only think, if you would only lift your consciousness above immediate and unthinking emotional reaction, then you would make progress. But progress is long in the making and slow. And as I've said before, if it seems like we're making a sudden jump, and we're making great progress overnight, and suddenly it's only because there's been a build-up over a long period, even lives, before I guess they popularized the term, the quantum leap occurs, and we seem to be functioning at a whole new and higher level, but as if suddenly, but it's not sudden at all. So if we're going to make progress in this field, the patience that maybe some of us find hard to muster is absolutely required. So anyway, about the emotional body here, as the very center of the personality in a planet that is still emotionally polarized, or in a solar system that is moving towards mental polarization, but still emotionally polarized. If we're going to make progress in that, we have quite a wrestling match, because the astral body is very strong, and as we know from looking at the charts, it is an undivided vehicle. Higher mind, lower mind, that's a division. Etheric, physical, that's a division, but not on the plane of the emotions, even though he says have nothing to do with the 6th and 7th lower subplanes. So anyway, this emotional body, this clearinghouse, this, how do I feel about it, It's like a busy railroad terminus, he says, that receives cargo from all directions and empties it into the great city of the personal physical plane life. A kind of way of processing and making available, but first through the emotional coloring that we may give to things. Then then as progress is made, the scene shifts higher, and the mental body becomes the focal point, and later the causal body becomes the important unit, sort of the central unit, and later still comes the ultimate sacrifice of even that until fourth degree, right? Until the man stands bereft of all that vibrates to the three worlds, and all is over as regards the personal life, though it may appear that he appears in person. It's a Maya Virupa, it's not real elemental personhood. Naught remains but the life of the spirit projecting itself, into familiar forms, but it's still the spirit. Naught remains but the life of the spirit and the voluntary giving of that life for the helping of the world. I love the way he summarizes important points, brings much information together at the end of a paragraph, So we get the big picture. He lays out the pieces and then he puts them together. So where have we shifted? How have we shifted? Where is our focus and where is our polarization, and is it variable? Or can it be sustained, a higher polarization over the customary polarization that we have been so used to? Think about it for a minute, I'd say emotionally that when the astral body transfers onto the second ray from the sixth, or from the first to, the ray of, in a way, suppression, to the sixth, to the second. By that time, it's easier to be mentally polarized and to go through our daily life with a mind held steady in the light, and eventually to have that mind as it is in Christ, who has, I don't know where to locate it, but I know it's, DK said it, who has that calmness forever unperturbed. Calmness forever unperturbed. So in the, going on here, in the speeding up of evolution, certain things have to be brought about before the man can be used as a reliable instrument. Reliable, note. We may have moments of reliability, but reliability is really over the long term, isn't it? And tempered steel means that the steel can stand both the hot and the cold, whereas iron might break, even though it's iron, and has the reputation of, being so strong. Steel is still stronger, and it's tempered and good for all kinds of circumstances. So we learn through adaptability to be like tempered steel. He said to Roberto Assagioli, you have the will like tempered steel, did he say, of your second ray soul. Of course, he had a first ray mind. So we have to be used as reliable instruments. That's how the masters assess us. That's how they choose, actually, whether we are suitable to be even peripheral associates of their ashram, We have to be able to contribute something. We have to be able to show up in a way that is helpful to the ashram. And we can't, we're pretty much a liability or a hazard until that midway point of mental polarization between the second and third initiations. But anyway, we have to bring certain things about before we are reliable, true as tempered steel, for the helping of the race. Hopefully, we can achieve that before too long. Forget not that, as a rule, a man, when tested and tried, forms the best tool. Notice how we are, he's speaking in terms of implementation. We are the implement, in a way, in the hands of the masters. We're the implement in the consciousness of the master. We're supposed to somehow absorb and represent as outposts the master's consciousness. So forget not that, as a rule, a man, when tested and tried, forms the best tool because he comprehends utterly the race consciousness. He's been through a lot, and he's witnessed it firsthand. And because he enters into the problems of the day in a manner more thorough than an ego from an earlier period. I think sometimes people spend a long time in the inner worlds, and then they get born and into a new incarnation, and they're surprised by what they find. Later in the progress, we don't take as long. We don't take as long in returning because we're eager to contribute, and eager to contribute in this area of greatest difficulty, which is the dense physical body of the planetary logos, our usual personality realm. Hence the masters desire to use those of you, now he's, pointing the finger, who live now to heal the wounds of the present suffering generation. Doesn't make any difference what ray, if you're closely affiliated with the hierarchy, you are some kind of healer, whole maker, harmonizer, putting things together where they were ripped apart, if they deserve to be put together. So the master wants us as instruments. What then has to be done? The matter I now give contains nothing very unusual, but it does hold thought for consideration by any who may desire to help, and then the ellipse, In preparing a soul for service, the guides of the race have to deal with each of the bodies. Things can be well enough in a couple of bodies, and one can be kind of out of alignment and make the individual not as usable as otherwise might be the case. So we have to be scrupulous and, basically, whoop, that's too dark. We have to be scrupulous about the condition of every one of the bodies. So the physical body first, training of the physical body. That's the very first thing. And I don't know what color I should put that into. Maybe that. Would that be okay? Well, kind of okay. Let's see, this is going to be physical body. Okay. So this involves certain definite requirements. The building of matter of the higher subplanes and the elimination of the lower and coarse matter. That's what the Om does, basically, on the inner planes, and maybe it also helps on the outer planes, too. This is needed because it is impossible for those with coarse bodies to react, to contact high vibration. Just very simple, right? It is impossible for the ego to transmit the higher knowledge and guidance through a coarse physical body. It is impossible for the loftier currents of thought to impact the little evolved physical brain. Hence, the refinement of the physical body is essential, and it is affected in various ways, all of them reasonable and utilitarian, so that we do not pursue freakish methods that probably do as much harm, more harm than good, actually. So, how do we do this? Pure food. Whoop. Pure food. And this involves a vegetarian diet, but he adds, chosen with wise discrimination. It takes some intelligence to be a healthy vegetarian. It's kind of amusing, but Alice Bailey talked about her early experiences among the Theosophists at Crotona, as it was named, I guess, in the Los Angeles area. There's another Crotona up there in Ojai now, but in the Los Angeles area. And she said they didn't look particularly healthy. So maybe they had not chosen with wise discrimination. It requires the eating only those vegetables and fruits that vitalize. So a sense of where the vitality comes from is really important. Careful judgment shown in the choice of food. Wise refraining from too heavy eating. He says we eat 4 times too much. Somewhere he says that. And a little pure, good food, perfectly assimilated, are all that a disciple requires. He makes it sound simple, you know. Of course, sometimes it's hard to get a hold of the quality that he's talking about, but much advance has been made in the understanding of the vegetarian diet since this was written. And so we should be in a position to carry this out if we have a will to do so. And I guess there are fruits and vegetables that don't particularly vitalize, and they're prepared in such a manner that the vitality is reduced. So basically, he says a little pure good food, perfectly assimilated, a little or all that the disciple requires. Now, probably we all know the effect of the overeating and how it drags you down, and just try to go think or do something with the higher chakras after you've overeaten, and you know what will happen. You ask what foods? Milk, honey, whole wheat bread, all the vegetables that contact the sun, oranges above all oranges. Always remember that little phrase. Bananas, raisins, nuts, some potatoes, not overly much, unpolished rice, not refined, and may I again reiterate, just as much of all the above as to ensure activity. Well, there is a discrimination because taste, can get in the way, and one eats more than is necessary to ensure activity. After all, beyond a certain point, what happens is inactivity results. Now, further, the cleanliness factor is another way of preparing the physical body for right reception. Much use of water externally and internally is vitally required. You kind of wonder in Tibet, where up in the high ranges where, well, maybe, the snows provide the water. There are certainly desert climates where it's hard to find sufficient water, and I know some people who really are doing fantastic service. They go to Africa and they help people dig wells that really work so that they can have an access to water, and that hours every day are not spent walking to and from the source of some water of questionable purity. So much use of water externally and internally, and in the Aquarian age, I'm sure that will be emphasized. It is an air sign, but it has that aqua part of it. So the use of water in so many different ways will come to the fore. Then we go on, and another requirement is the sleep. Even in this time of the COVID epidemic, they've been noticing the curative effect of sleep in relation to that disease. And this, of course, in our hectic Western environment, is difficult to keep regular. Sometimes there's sacrifice involved. In the new esoteric schools, the hours of sleep are between 10 in the evening and 5 in the morning, just as it says here. But sometimes when you're trying to contact people in live meditation who are all over the world, you just cannot easily hold to that kind of regularity and observe those particular hours. Although I'm sure that in terms of the inner classes that we attend, sometimes remember and oftentimes forget, It helps to observe the particular hours that he's talking about. This should be always between the hours of 10 in the evening and 5 in the morning. And as much as possible out of doors. I remember going to the Waysack Valley, and there were maybe 8 of us there, and some people like to sleep with their tent flap open, even though it was relatively cold in May of 2000. And they were the more experienced mountain types. We had some people who had a lot of experience going onto the mountains, and others kept the tent flap down and maybe did not oxygenate themselves quite as well. As much as possible out of doors. You kind of wonder, these little personal details. Is that how the Tibetan manages his sleep, or is it just so that for someone of his caliber, sleep can be a variable, which is not upon which sustaining the vitality of the vehicle is not dependent. And my sunshine. They tell us the new types of clothing we can wear to leave that area between the shoulder blades exposed to the sun. Someone said they're called tank tops. I've heard the word, but now I get the idea. But that will be the way during the age of Aquarius, when the etheric body is studied and prana is studied, and we understand more about the pranic triangle and the absorption of prana in the best way, solar prana especially, although planetary prana is also there, coming in through the pores, as we've been told. Contact with the sun should be much sought after, and the vitalization that comes through its rays. The sun kills all germs and frees from disease. Now, this is really important. Seems so straightforward, but sometimes we need to be reminded of straightforward things, or we need to be reminded straightforwardly. Contact with the sun. Sometimes here in Finland, it gets really cold, but the sun shines, and you wonder how it can ever get through all of the wrappings that you have to wear. But apparently, even though maybe not as much as in the warmer times, it does get through. Just the way the emanations of the moon, I think according to Blavatsky, are not very salubrious. They are of a negative type, even though the poets seem to like moonlight. So sleep, sunshine, cleanliness, right diet, pure food, and only as much as may be needed, and that is a discrimination. When these 4 requirements, okay, so what do we have there? Let's see here. So when these requirements, and, I wonder, testing the memory, pure food, cleanliness, sleep, and the sun are attended to adequately, a definite process of elimination proceeds, elimination, purification, and in the course of a few years, the whole physical body shifts its polarization gradually up until ultimately you have the body composed of atomic subplane matter, which really is etheric. It's not necessarily that we're going to disappear, but the physical subplane matter of the etheric physical plane has to do with the first subplane. I suppose there are those who do function specifically in their etheric body, just as there will be planets that will drop their outer crust and be physically present as etheric. But for right now, we seem to be maybe talking about a certain proportion of etheric matter in the normally dense physical body. So elimination occurs. The use of the Om helps with that. It casts out what is unnecessary, and in the course of a few years, if one gets a hold of this book early enough, one can do it, Yeah. For some of us, who are almost 80 years old, we may have to wait till the next time to see things through in the way here suggested. You will have a body composed of atomic subplane matter. Well, he's going to elaborate on that in the original. But then realistically, this may take several incarnations, but it should be borne in mind that at each fresh incarnation, a body is taken of the exact quality, if I may so put it, as the one previously discarded at death. That is interesting. So there is a continuity, isn't there? And we're not going to skip any steps in the process. Hence, time is never lost in building. There, you say, oh, I've lost it, lost my body, but inwardly the etheric mold is sustained and regrasped in its essential quality. Obviously, the conformity of the outer body will change according to heredity, but the general quality of the etheric body upon which the outer body is built will be that which you had when you departed an incarnation. And there's something there relating to the way you are reborn in the sign in which you departed. That's not the rising sign, but the sun sign. Your sun sign is, says the Tibetan, apparently the same as the sun sign in which you departed. Now, all of this will be part of reincarnational research. Be a fascinating subject, undertaken at first by the scientific group using the first, fifth, and I think seventh rays particularly, and one can imagine the sign Cancer will be important, related as it is to the law of rebirth. reincarnation. Cancer being the carne, the meat, the flesh. Hence, time is never lost in building. Eventually, 2 other methods will be available by which rapid refining may be effected, brought about. You know, this is part of the wonder of the New Age being predicted here. So the use of colored lights. I know people that are deeply into that already, and fairly astute at it, I would say. There's some encyclopedia, Dinshaw Gadiali and his son Darius Dinshaw. I think that those are the 2 books I know of anyway, that deal with the application for healing purposes, and I suppose for purposes of refinement, dealing with colored light accordingly. So they use a crystal, and the light is coming up from above, and you're in a darkened room. And the light, which veils a certain type of energy, but also delivers it, is turned on, and you bathe in that light. Remember that Tibetan tells one of his students that take this orangish light through your body, all the way through your body, and bathe in it as you would bathe in the waters of the sea. When we do the triangles meditation, we use that example of how to sort of prepare with the master's vibration and the angel, the vibration of the angel of the presence, how to prepare the descent of that type of light to make the apparatus more sensitive to the higher influences. These lights are played on the body, of the disciple, and effect a shaking out process and a simultaneous stimulation of the atoms. Okay. So maybe sounding the Om as the colored light is working, or sounding a certain pitch as the colored light is working, a pitch which corresponds with the color of the light, while bathing in the light, can be quite effective. But this cannot be done until further information is given anent the rays. When a man's ray is known, stimulation will come from the use of his own color, I suppose soul ray color. A building in will be brought about by the use of his complementary color, you know, like violet is to yellow, like blue is to orange, like red is to green. And disintegration of unwanted matter will be brought about by the use of an antagonistic color. Do we call this a clashing color? Okay. Now that's 100 years ago, and I say progress has been considerable. But who knows if we are still, doing it the right way, according to occult knowledge. This knowledge will later on be communicated to the great bodies that hold custody of the mysteries, the Church and the Masons. and maybe to a certain extent, the banded esoteric organisms, that's usually completing the triangle, with the church organism, the Masonic organism, and then the banded esoteric organisms. Wait, for the time is not yet. When the mysteries are restored, some of this information will be in the hands of the two bodies I refer to. Right now we have the outer shell and kind of a weak representation of the real thing, as it could go on in the inner worlds as they affect the outer worlds. But at least we have the form. Masonry has to preserve the form in general of these emerging mysteries, and in the church the form is also sustained. A little more, the stimulation of music. I experienced that today, as I say, I wandered into some of the finest piano playing that I've heard in a long time, and just so inspiring. But here he has something rather more scientific in mind. Certain sounds shatter and break. Certain other sounds stimulate and attract. When the key of a man's life is known, again, maybe based on the soul ray sound, and when the sounds he responds to is recognized, the sound, now that could be, when he uses a word like that, monadic, because, the soul is the word and the monad is the sound. When the sound he responds to is recognized, then comes the possibility of the utilization of sound in refinement. All that is at present possible to you, to those of you who seek to serve, is to attend to the above essentials and seek contact with high vibration. There was this man, L.U.T., and he was a troubled man in Alice Bailey's groups and in the Tibetans' groups. He was subject to much glamour. I think he was a Taurus. Was it with Leo moon and Libra rising, or was it with Leo rising and Libra moon? But anyway, he was a Taurus in his sun sign. And at one point, I guess he was there because he had made a tremendous sacrifice in a previous life for Master DK, and Master DK says, we're not ungrateful. So he was watching over this man as part of his groups. And at a certain point, instead of recommending a meditation, he said, listen, even though, it was the 1940s and you didn't get the kind of fidelity you get now, listen to the great music of the world. That's your assignment. And enter into that music. I suppose as someone with Taurus, Libra, and a lot of Venus, obviously, he would be responsive to that kind of approach. And DK had something in mind about how, beauty could assist this man, because he was in a pretty difficult situation because of his attachment to the opposite sex. So actually, DK told him, look, choose your good friends among men and not so much the women, because he was, the victim of sex. I'll read a little more because I have a program coming up right away. One more point I would like to give, and that is that in the manipulation of electricity lies much that concerns the vivification of the bodies, especially just now of the etheric. I've used micro amperage in certain devices that kill off certain bacteria, and apparently, at least that's the claim, it puts a pulse, a micro electric pulse into your blood. Um, and maybe as an example of this, a little bit of electromedicine. It's coming too, because Aquarius is an age of electricity, fifth ray, right? The principal use the sun has is the vitalizing of the etheric. The heat of the sun is electrical force adapted to the need of the great average majority in all kingdoms of nature. And as progress is made, an intensification of this force will be possible. But the heat of the sun is electrical force. Sun is not just fire. It's composed differently. So herein lies one of the secrets of initiation, and the whole electrical approach to initiation is not the ceremonial approach, and it's a very important approach, especially in a fifth ray age. So basically what I'll do here is, it's the blue logo, so we'll make it blue. The vitalizing of the etheric. And notice how it's got to be useful for many types of lives and kingdoms. It cannot just single out and prefer only one. As progress is made, an intensification of this force will be possible in etheric individual cases. Herein lies one of the secrets of initiation. In the old days, the rod of initiation actually acted as a conductor of this force to the centers of the initiate. It was so constructed that it answered this purpose. Has that changed? The rod of initiation as a conductor of electrical force? Seems to me it would still be so. Now, on a higher turn of the spiral, just the same need and purpose are served, though the method of application necessarily differs owing to the change in the polarization of the race. Well, it's the, man is in his causal body during those earlier initiations, and the centers touched by the rod can be not only etheric, but emotional, mental. The polarization is now no longer physical, as it was in Lemurian times, but is either emotional or mental. The method of application differs in all three, and hence the safeguarding of the secret. It holds the mystery hid. So the rod is applied differently. The electrical stimulation is calibrated according to the application. It is a great science, the science of initiation. And friends, that's all I have time for right now. Let's see if I can Maybe not. I'm trying to. All right, we're on page 337, and I think we began on 332, letter 10, which would take it to 337. And then I'll copy this, and we'll begin with program number 62 shortly. Okay. So that's the end of 61. And it's 332 to 337. Remember, I've skipped a big chunk here because I want to give that some kind of very strong attention. And this is the 5th of February. And we'll start with program 62 next time, and it'll be from 337 onward, and it will be in February, and hopefully soon in February, but I don't know when. Coming up, it will be so. Okay, and then we'll get into the refining of the etheric. We've talked about the refining of the physical with pure food and sleep and what all did he say? Cleanliness, the sun, and additional qualities, colored lights and music. I'm going to add to that. And just say here, also colored lights and music. So I guess there are 6 possibilities for refining the physical, and now we're going to talk about refinement of the etheric. So let's move on together and deeply assimilating. You know, he says a little food, really well assimilated. Well, he's given us a lot of food, food for thought, so we have to chew it well and assimilate it in short order and make sure it's reasonably digested. And I won't say we have only 4 years to do it, but it certainly would be helpful because an assessment will come about humanity's possibilities, and it would be good if the disciples of the world could respond in such a manner that they are indicating the increasing worthiness of humanity to receive the impartation of the next teaching. All right. So lots of love, many blessings, and we'll be talking to you soon. And bye for now.